Hello, good afternoon, and dear participants. We'd like to welcome you to a side event being held during the Regional Forum for Sustainable Development. You're very welcome to join us today for the side event on sustainable food systems to build back better in Europe and Central Asia, carrying forward the UN Food Systems Summit. Today's side event is organized by the Issue-Based Coalition on Sustainable Food Systems, our UN regional platform in the region of Europe and Central Asia, in cooperation with Chatham House. Chatham House, well known to many of you, I'm sure, is an international think tank with a mission to help governments and societies build a sustainably secure, prosperous and just world. My name is Mary Kenny. I work at FAO's regional office for Europe and Central Asia, managing work and working on work related to food systems, food safety and nutrition. And I'm really pleased to moderate today's event. Our main objective today is to provide all of us with an opportunity for a regional discussion, sharing knowledge and experiences on the implementation of the UN Food Systems National Pathways as a key component and element to follow up to the UN Food Systems Summit. We have a full, as you've seen, we have a full and varied agenda. We will start soon with to present the findings of a regional stocktake. We've been working on to really synthesize the results of the UN Food Systems Summit and what it means in our region. We're then very pleased to be joined by 3 conveners from the region, conveners of national UN Food Systems Summit dialogues in Albania, Hungary, and Uzbekistan. And then in the last part of our agenda, we will dig deeper into some key policy issues important to our region, including environmental sustainability, food loss and waste prevention, and women's empowerment and supportive role in food systems. Please let me thank all contributors and panel members for today's session and our event today. And many thanks also to the UNECE, the main organizer of the Regional Forum for Sustainable Development, for giving us this slot to organize our side event today. Before we proceed into the technical agenda, I think we're all quite familiar by now with Zoom meetings and Zoom sessions, but we're pleased to remind us all that we have English and Russian interpretation today, simultaneous, so you can click the globe button at the end of your screen. We invite you to present any questions you may have in the Q&A tab at the end of the screen. Also, if you have any comments or information you want to share with each other, you may do that in the chat button. Please feel free to write your questions or comments in either Russian or English language. We will facilitate and ensure that we take account of everything. And please note also, as it says in the top button, that we are recording today's event. So they are the technical housekeeping information, and with that, as participants are joining us, I'm really pleased to officially open the side event. And for that, I'm pleased to introduce Mr. Raymond Yelle, who is the Regional Program Leader and Deputy Regional Representative in FAO's Regional Office for Europe and Central Asia. Raymond is also FAO's representative for Albania, Armenia, Georgia, and Moldova. And he's also acting, or is the co-chair of the Issue-Based Coalition on Sustainable Food System. And Raymond, please, over to you to make the opening on behalf of the Issue-Based Coalition on Sustainable Food Systems. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mary, for this introduction. Good morning, good afternoon, colleagues, dear participants, as well as also, of course, a very warm welcome on behalf of the Issue-Based Coalition to our also panelists in this meeting. I was following this morning a bit the plenary session of the Sustainable Regional Development Forum in Geneva, and of course, if you follow this discussion, the issue of food systems, food supply is something which is quite really on top, certainly also of the agenda. Taking the current situation we are in, also with the war in Ukraine. Let me just, in this case, say a couple of words again also to the IBC. The IBC, the Issue-Based Coalition, is a regional UN mechanism which is supporting the UN country teams in the region, promoting and certainly advertising issues related to sustainable food systems. Co-chairs are FAO, WHO, as well as UNICEF, and we have certainly other UN agency members like WFP, UNECE, WMO, IFAD, as well as also UNDP. The important point is that we are addressing the food systems also in a multi-institutional modality. Europe and Central Asia is the only region which currently has such a dedicated issue-based coalition on food systems. And we think this demonstrates really the attention given by the UN systems to the multi-sectoral and the multi-agency approach working on food systems. Repairing and improving our food systems facilitates the achieving of the SDGs, not at last due to the multidimensional nature of the food system, touching, of course, also on economic, environmental, and also social aspects. The IBC supports, as I mentioned, the UN country teams on advocacy, knowledge sharing, as well as also on the development of UN cooperation frameworks and facilitating policy integration through the food systems approach. And if we are talking about food systems is not only about food production. It is also encompassing a wider range of areas such as health, education, climate, and trade. So there is no UN agency alone which is in a position to fully support the member states in the food systems work. Cooperation amongst the different UN agencies and other stakeholders is really needed to address the complexity of food systems related policy issues. This as well applies, of course, also to the work of the member states. We have all learned this from the Agenda 2030 for Sustainable Development, and partnership and cooperation are key means of implementation for the achievement of the SDG. This is certainly also one of the reasons why there is also a key SDG related to this area. We need to listen to the diverse voices and perspectives from different ministries, governmental institutions, CSOs, academia, as well as also the private sector, in order to assess the synergies, to work together, or maximizing these to identify the trade-offs and to define also a strategy to minimize the negative implications in achieving the SDGs. The UN Food Systems Summit last year has created, I think, a great momentum around sustainable food systems. We are really glad to see that the commitment of the member states and the other stakeholders on transforming our food systems to make them more sustainable is very, very high on the agenda. And I think the food systems related issues, as I have mentioned it also at the beginning, have been put very much on the spotlight now by the war also in Ukraine, but of course also by the COVID-19 pandemic in the last 2 years. So a strong food governance, food systems governance has been put in place to support the work on food systems. A number of global, regional and national mechanisms have been established to support the food systems related work, such as also the UN Coordination Hub, the UN Food Systems Coalitions, the national teams working with the national conveners, and others like the IBC on sustainable food systems, which were already in place before the summit and which is in principle a mechanism which stands ready to support the further follow-up. The IBC sustainable food systems has been very active in supporting the UN Food Systems Summit. We provided technical guidance to the member states on the national dialogues, as well as also organizing last year in May, the UN Food Systems Regional Dialogue to share knowledge on key policy and governing issues concerning the food systems in the region, such as also ensuring nutritious and healthy food to all, particularly the most vulnerable, supporting smallholders through equitable access to assets and resources, greening also value chains, and reducing the environmental impact for food production. The IBC will continue to facilitate knowledge and experience exchange. It will also require to support implementation of the commitments which the countries have in fact, let's say, provided within their UN Food Systems Summit national pathway. So the events today, in fact, is based on the request which we have received by the member states to have space for discussions on the results of the UN Food Systems Summit, exchange views on the implementation of the pathways, and to find opportunities for regional and sub-regional cooperation. So the results of the regional stocktake report on the UN food system member states dialogue and national pathways, which is going to be presented by the Chatham House now right at after my intervention, will be really helpful to understand the regional priorities and to develop our support to the member states accordingly in a structured way. Our actions, again, taking the current crisis in the region into consideration, our actions need to be bold, not only in the scope, but also in the multi-sectoral collaboration. This is particularly relevant today also to map out at these meetings, as we are talking about convergence of interests from the different stakeholders in accelerating the actions to transform our food systems. And the panels which we have in this case, the panels with, in principle, the conveners, having Emira from Albania, David from Hungary, and Alisher from Uzbekistan, is going to give a clear insight on this. And then, of course, also the very specific, let's say, technical areas, Maxime with the environmental impacts, Nino with promoting women's empowerment, and of course, certainly last but not least, also Christina on food loss and waste. So I'm very much looking forward for this discussion and presentation. Thank you very much. And Mary, over to you.
Thank you. Thank you, Raymond, for very comprehensive but also very specific comments to launch our, officially open our side event today. Really showing also the many multiple aspects and multiple sectors and need for a very much a coordinated and strong approach to sustainably improve and transform, continue transforming our food systems. We will now turn to the first part of our agenda, and it's a real pleasure to introduce Laura Wellesley. Laura is a Senior Research Fellow working for the Environment and Society Programme at Chatham House. And Laura will present. We know that there's a lot of ongoing work and energy at country level, to follow up on the UN Food Systems Summit. But we thought it can even help further that work and further regional dialogue around food systems by having a regional stock take. And Laura will present some of the main findings of the upcoming report, including some of the priority issues that we see have emerged across the region, with some differences also within the region. And also highlight the nature and extent of some of the food systems challenges that are still on the table and need to be continued to work on. We hope the report will continue, as I say, to support the ongoing rich discussions at country and regional level on transforming food systems. Laura, over to you. Thanks very much.
Thanks, Mary, and thanks, Raymond, also for the introduction. And hello, everyone. Thanks very much for giving me the time to present this stock take today. If we could skip to the next slide. Mary's actually just given a really good overview of what I'll talk about, so I think I'll dive straight in the interest of time. So next slide, please. So just to give a very brief introduction of the stock take exercise that we've carried out at Chatham House, we were asked by the FAO Regional Office to carry out this initial stock take to do, as Mary said, to synthesize the outcomes of the Food Systems Summit and identify key priority areas for action in support of food system transformation across the region. Our analysis was based on a review of national pathways submitted by the FAO programme countries and of feedback from a series of national dialogues held in the run-up to the summit. For that reason, we only include in our analysis those countries who engaged in the process and submitted a national pathway. So that was 11 of the FAO's country offices in total. The countries greyed out on this slide aren't included in our analysis. Next slide, please. So in looking across the national pathways and dialogues, we mapped out the issues, priorities, goals, actions that were included there, and really searched for areas of commonality and synergy. And in doing so, we came to 6 key priority areas, which were really quite common across the countries of the Western Balkans and Turkey, CIS Europe, the Caucasus and Central Asia. They're not too dissimilar or surprising, I think, from conversations at the level of the summit and you know, the key issues that really run through discussions of food system transformation more broadly, but they do reflect some really particular challenges and opportunities in the region. So managing land and water resources sustainably and responsibly is noted as a real top priority in these countries. There's recognition that water resources in agriculture have historically been overexploited or used inefficiently, and a commitment to modernising irrigation systems in particular, and strengthening governance and cooperation around water use, both at the national level through cross-government coordination and improved data collection and analysis, and at the regional level through transboundary water management in particular. And strong governance and cooperation were also noted as a priority in relation to sustainable land use planning. There was a strong drive towards the aggregation of small farmers to support more efficient land use, and towards organic production as a means of tackling the overuse of chemical inputs and their impact on soil fertility and ecosystems. Empowering and enabling small-scale producers was another priority really at the top of the list. So small and medium-sized producers dominate agricultural production in the region, but don't always have equal access to markets, to finance and insurance, to training and education. So the dialogues and pathways focus heavily on enhancing extension services, increasing access to finance and disaster risk insurance, improving access to information services, data and training, and supporting income diversification to boost resilience and drive rural development more broadly. Poor safety infrastructure and processes were identified as a common barrier to trade in the region. So there was a strong commitment to aligning with international standards on food safety and investing in the human capital and hard infrastructure needed to improve both safety and quality in food value chains. In terms of nutrition security, most countries in the region note that there's a growing double burden of malnutrition, so a coexistence of undernourishment and overweight, obesity, and diet-related disease. So there's a focus on improving dietary quality, often through programs like school meal provision and awareness campaigns. And alongside that, a real focus as well on reducing food loss and waste along the value chain. Recognizing that rural to urban migration is a common experience in the region, there's interest in boosting employment and education opportunities in the rural economy to attract young talent. And in recognition of the central role that women play in production, a commitment to improving women producers' access to education and training and business and financial support. Building resilience to climate change, to climate risk, is another common theme among small-scale producers particularly, and a number of countries, Kazakhstan, Kyrgyzstan, Turkey, Serbia, Ukraine and Uzbekistan, all note the importance of reducing sectoral emissions as a means of mitigating climate change, including through the deployment of renewable energy in production. So those were not the only priorities by any means to come out of the national pathways and dialogues, but they were the dominant themes that were common across the region. Next slide, please. So in addition to those key priorities, we saw 4 key enablers of food system transformation really being emphasized. The first is cooperation and coordination across sectors, across governments, between countries, and between the policy and scientific communities. The second is finance and investment, not only the increased flow of investment into the agricultural sector, but improved access to finance, particularly for small-scale producers and for women. And the third is greater involvement in regional and international trade, and an increase in exports and in the competitiveness of those exports. And the fourth is improved data coverage and analysis across various food system dimensions, but particularly climate risk and nutrition insecurity. Next slide, please. So turning briefly to the EU, as I said, our analysis is focused on Eastern Europe and Central Asia, but a lot of momentum for food system transformation in the region is coming from the EU and from EU member states. 15 member states convened national dialogues ahead of the summit, and 8 submitted national pathways. But the EU as a bloc also agreed on 6 common priorities listed here. So strengthening sustainability and resilience, promoting healthy diets through sustainable food systems, strengthening food safety and public health, contributing to the sustainability and resilience of food systems through trade, new finance solutions and business models, and improving scientific knowledge and ensuring a strong science policy interface. So you can already see from these 2 lists that there's a lot of common ground here. And in many cases, the key entry points in terms of delivering on these priorities are also very similar, but there is some difference. In the case of dietary change, for example, a common priority in Eastern Europe and Central Asia is on increasing vegetable production, so increasing the diversity of diets and the share of nutrient-rich foods in diets, and reducing junk food. And in the EU, there's a really strong emphasis on sustainable and healthy diets. So that includes moves like reducing meat consumption and investing in plant-based protein. So there are a few kind of areas of divergence in terms of where the emphasis is placed on how best to deliver on these priorities. Next slide, please. While there's a lot of common ground between the countries at national level in the region, we do see some interesting nuances at the sub-regional level. So different priority areas are afforded different levels of importance across the Western Balkans, Caucasus, and Central Asia. For Albania, Serbia, and Turkey, for example, improvements to food safety are seen as absolutely key to boosting the competitiveness of exports. In Armenia, Azerbaijan, Georgia, and Ukraine, there's a big focus on digitalization, on technological innovation, and entrepreneurship as a means of delivering modernized and competitive value chains. And in Central Asia, boosting domestic production is more of a priority than in the other two sub-regions, as is the sustainable management of stressed and transboundary water sources. Next slide, please. Several countries in preparation for the summit held multiple subnational dialogues in different locations, and these give some insights into the local variation that we'll see in terms of challenges and priorities for food system transformation. Picking out Uzbekistan here in the middle, for example, dialogues were held in Karakalpakstan in the northwest of the country and in the city of Namangan in the east. Stakeholders in both of those dialogues pointed to poor health and nutrition, but as a result of quite different food environments. So in Karakalpakstan, historic overexploitation of the Aral Sea has led to very poor soil quality and low productivity, meaning that there's a high dependence on imports and that food prices are high, and a general trend towards overconsumption of meat, of vegetable oil, and of karache, black tea drunk with milk. In Namangan, in the east of the country, the concerns are more centered around the overconsumption of junk foods, of around TV advertising of high fat, salt, and sugar foods to children, and of low food safety standards contributing to poor health. So I'll skip over Tajikistan and Albania, given that time is short, but I think what we take from this is that it's going to be important for national agencies to recognise the very different conditions and priorities that exist at sub-national level. Next slide, please. So just a final word then on taking a holistic approach to policy planning. Raymond pointed to the fact that we know that food systems are multidimensional, that we can't focus on agricultural production alone. We need to look at the environment, health, education, nutrition, trade, economy, rural development, inclusion. And I think it's important to recognise that the national pathways from the region do a very good job of covering all of those dimensions, that there's a recognition that focusing on the food value chain in a kind of narrow sense is not enough. But there are some important opportunities for holistic policy planning that risk being overlooked if from here on the national pathways and plans therein are not fully integrated across government strategies. The national pathways for food system transformation could yield really important co-benefits in other areas if we see linking across policy. So modernised irrigation systems that are powered by renewable energy, for example, could improve the reliability of energy supply for those irrigation networks, reduce running costs for farmers, improve access to irrigation in remote areas that are maybe off-grid, but also lower sectoral emissions and reduce farmers' exposure to energy price hikes, the likes of which we're seeing now. Similarly, linking up, joining the dots between policy areas will be essential to delivering on the national pathways successfully. For example, rural development and the empowerment of small-scale producers in remote locations won't be possible if there's not parallel investment in improved transport logistics, and connectivity, things like cold chain supply chains as well. So it's important that as we move forwards with the discussions coming out of the Food System Summit, that there is this strong emphasis on coordination across policy areas. And I look forward to hearing from the next panel on their perspectives on that. I will leave it there. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you, Laura, for this preliminary overview and insights into some of the key findings from the regional stocktake. I see there are the reports, there are some comments already. We will make it available once it is ready in the next few weeks. We're working on the final draft. So we will make it available. At the moment, I don't see any specific questions to Laura, but in case you do have any questions or comments you would like to make, please do feel free to put them in the Q&A, and we can capture them as a bit later in today's event. We do want to go deeper now. I think and I'm very pleased that we have 3 UN Food System Summit national conveners. We know that across the region of Europe and Central Asia, our region has been particularly active in the lead up to the UN Food System Summit and now continues. Overall, we had, by the end of 2021, there were 23 member states had published their national pathways across the region, really tailored to local context and priorities in the country. 96 independent dialogues had also taken place. And we know that countries are continuing to look into the different official coalitions of action from the UN Food System Summit and following up on the action tracks as well. It's really important now to have our next panel discussion with the conveners, as Antonio Guterres, the UN Secretary General, said at the end of the UN Food System Summit, and we continually hear it from many different people, that really the action now needs to be at country level, national, but also looking at local specificities, as we know. Mr. Guterres said we must support national mechanisms that develop and implement the national pathways that have been developed, because action must be driven at country level by governments and all stakeholders working together in the local context. Let me introduce our panel members once more. Raymond kindly did at the beginning, but we're very pleased to have Ermira Gieci, Deputy Minister of Agriculture from the Ministry of Agriculture and Rural Development in Albania. We would kindly ask you, great, we see you there on the screen. We also have Mr. David Benčić, Deputy State Secretary for International Affairs from the Ministry of Agriculture in Hungary. You're very welcome, Mr. Benčić, great to see you. And we also have Mr. Alisher Shukurov, advisor to the Minister for Agriculture in Uzbekistan. And you are all very welcome. I also want to add that we know that Hungary, you published your national pathway just there recently at the end of March in 2022. So I'm sure we'll get some fresh insights into that as well. We have, to kick off the discussion, we have some issues we thought it could be interesting to discuss with you. And we're also happy to take further questions or comments from the audience as we go forward. I think we'd like to start with you, Ms. Ermira Gieci, in particular to hear a little bit from you on in the Albanian context, in terms of during the member state dialogues and let's say in the last year, if you can describe to us or give us some inputs, some ideas on some of the key policy issues that have been discussed and are seen important for improving the sustainability of food systems in Albania. And also, if you can show where policy integration or multi-sectoral work or multi-stakeholder dialogue was kind of ignited or more evident in discussing those issues. Thank you.
Thank you, Mary. Sustainable food systems are a priority of the new strategy for agriculture, rural development and fisheries 2022-2027. We have 4 general objectives. The first one is promoting sustainable food production and quality through the development of a competitive and innovative agri-food sector, followed by the strengthening sustainable management of natural resources and climate actions, strengthening the socio-economic fabric of rural areas, and fostering sustainable maritime and inland water development. Meanwhile, we have a cross-cutting objective which has to do with transfer of knowledge and innovation. Related with multi-sectoral collaboration, I can mention that government of Albania is preparing the national strategy for development of integration, number 3. The first draft will be ready by the end of July 2022. And sustainable food systems will be one of the pillars, objectives for agriculture, rural development, and fisheries in this strategy. And the second one that I would like to share with you is One Health approach. One of the FSS pathways identified during the national FSS dialogues. With the support of UN, we will include it as priority action in the post-FSS agenda. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you very much. I'm going to let's hear a little bit from you, Mr. Benčić, and it really is the same question almost. We'd like to hear from the Hungarian context in terms of what are some of the priority policy issues that are emerging and are on the table now, and also give us a flavor of some of the traction, let's say, that has been facilitated through the dialogue process and through the coming together of different ministries and different stakeholders. Thank you.
Absolutely. Dear colleagues, first and most of all, I would like to thank you for the opportunity. Can you all hear me? So do you hear me? Perfect, because I'm sitting in a place which is not my office. The background tells much about it. But I'm right now in one of the greatest agriculture forum in Hungary, which is Agrarium 2022. And I'm actually broadcasting from here. So if you hear something, there's a reason for that. So coming back to your question, I have to say that in order to make sure that the transition towards sustainable food systems can be clearly accelerated, we believe that the development of research and technology is the key. So we are very committed to put more emphasis on precision technologies, because as we all know, the land where we can produce is ever less, and the amount we need is ever growing. So that's the only one of the major issues what we have to face. Now, a good example is a vertical indoor farming, what I've been already discussed within this framework. And I believe that the solution to complement smarter outdoor farming with novel ways of indoor food production, where we have the chance of introduce industrial thinking, industry 4.0 IoT, and productivity to completely controlled, predictable environments. And this is what matters the most. So vertical farming, as we know it right now, today is focusing mainly on leafy greens, but it's actually far more than that. And now we're exploring together with academia, the private sector, government. We try to see what is possible, because it's not only about Hungary. We are quite in a good position. We have good soil. We have fairly good climate, although the drought is ever more significant. But the climate is fine. The agriculture education is perfectly fine. So we have good conditions here. But for the world, we need new solutions, and I think that's one of the key solutions we can offer. So with crop like alfalfa and barley grass, even today, we could cover 30% of the daily intake of milk cow, but we believe we can achieve much more by combining different novel feeds. 47% of all agriculture output globally is used to feed animals. So in a similar approach, we develop a fully circular, zero waste, urban food hub, affordable even for the poorest people. This could stop human hunger and return large parts of land to nature. So if you allow me, I would like to emphasize this very topic as we discuss so much more. That would be my contribution now.
Thank you, Mr. Bensic, and thank you for giving it some insights into the important discussions in Hungary at the moment on research and development, but also showing that it's very much across the government sector, but also with academia and private sector, as you clearly said. I'd like to turn now to you, Alisher Sukharov. Very pleased again that you can also join us from Uzbekistan. We shift slightly to hearing in terms of what's happening now in Uzbekistan to follow up on the very rich discussions and commitments that Uzbekistan has made. So what is happening now to build on the pathway, and again, what are some of the core focus and let's say even good success stories you can see coming out of the whole process? Over to you, Mr. Sukharov. Thank you.
Good afternoon. Thank you, Mary. Thank you for giving this opportunity. Colleagues, it's really great to join this event. Indeed, it's really important to share some of our experiences, really what's happening after the summit, or in general, how is the things are going on the ground in the countries. I think this is really interesting. And speaking about Uzbekistan, so actually last 5 years, we experienced massive reforms in the country because of the new government, and the focus was agri-food sector was always focused in the policy of the government. And the Food System Summit, indeed, it was the really timely event to support the countries to really revisit the national strategies and the programs. And we, after the event, of course, we revisited our programs. This gave us a great opportunity, first of all. And now I would like to highlight very briefly 5 areas we are strongly focusing. One is the new program now we are introducing, which is the National Strategy on Food Security and Nutrition. So our strong focus will be now for nutrition, because we have a program, Agriculture Development Strategy up to 2030. And now the new program is really next level, is to focus more integrated manner together with different other ministries like health ministry and other ministries to focus for more nutrition areas, which we really lack it, speaking honestly, in previous programs. And the second area is access to finance. It was mentioned in the presentation, a really important area. Now agri-food sector in Uzbekistan really getting big attention, and we observe it, we really accept it and mobilize it. Huge amount of resources from different IFIs. It's about $3 billion directly supporting to the agri-food sector. But always the challenge was for the smallholders. This is the great experience that we focused too much for the big companies, big farmers, but still today, the smallholders to access the finance is the challenge. Even we're working with number of agencies, which is the strong focus is the smallholders, but on the ground, the legal and institutional structure only allows for the big companies and the farmers to access to the farmers finance. That's why our next second program is to support the small holders. We launch it now, small scale investment program. So, and we are now supporting, particularly on the ground in the pilot regions, to provide the grant scheme for the smallholders. So this is the second program we are working on. And the third area is the land reform. So traditionally, Uzbekistan, all land is the government land, and always challenges are there. And now we're having the massive land reform. Of course, government ownership is not really, it is in place, but we're establishing the transparent system through auction system to the land, to access to the land, particularly for the smallholders. This is another area we are focusing. And the next area is the climate change. So we are now working in the national review in the agri-food sector, the impact of the climate change to the agri-food sector, and developing the measures. So this is ongoing work, and I would like to thank our partners now jointly really supporting for this exercise, and it will come very soon with the clear recommendations how we will move ahead with the climate change action in Uzbekistan. Last but not least, agriculture transformation requires new knowledge and innovations. As our colleague from Hungary mentioned, that the research and development is the key. So we launched it, of course, it was before the summit, the national program, we call it AKIS Agriculture Knowledge Innovation System. So we now continue this program, and this is we are now in the real implementation phase of the implementing or introducing the agriculture knowledge innovation system on the ground. We are now in the phase of establishment knowledge hubs in the regions. It will be in 13 regions of Uzbekistan. We have already established it in 2 regions. So we are ready also to share this experience with other countries, which is covering these knowledge hubs, agriculture research, education, and extension. So this is really new movement in Uzbekistan. So these 5 areas, what I can share that after the summit we're focusing and we're working on now with the national partners and also all different stakeholders. Thank you.
Great, thank you very much. I can feel the energy from here, from Uzbekistan, and really the channeled way and issues that some of them have been, let's say, long-standing issues, as you said, such as land reform, but again, maybe there's a renewed opportunity to work across sectors and perhaps to work in a more specific way, also addressing the local issues and really coming up, I guess, with solutions that can work, as you say, for the smallholders, also for the bigger industries, but also then working with different ministries across the sectors. So I think, yeah, thank you very much for the updates and the insights into the focus in Uzbekistan. We see that there's a question in one of the chats, which is related to also raising again the fact that there is a changing context in our region and due to the war in Ukraine, and we really wanted to hear a little bit from all 3 of you, whoever wants to come in on this, to know from you what impacts are you feeling in terms of the food supply, the food system, but also how is this affecting how you're implementing or going forward to implement the pathways and to in some ways continue to build on transforming food systems. So Ermira, I can maybe go back to you if you'd like to take this point first, and then we can move to you also, Mr. Bensic. Thank you, Ermira.
Thank you again. Both the sustainable food system and the Ukraine crisis ask for resilience of the food systems. Wheat and fertilizers prices are increasing, decreasing production incomes, and consumer confidence will result in increased risk of food insecurity. We need short-term and long-term solutions to respond to crisis. Promotion of organic farming and fertilizers is one potential development for sustainable food systems. We will integrate SFS and response to Ukraine crisis in one package. Government of Albania and European Union will discuss today and tomorrow, 6 and 7 of April, on the new priorities in IPA 2023 IPART and the 2021-2027 support program to respond to emerging priorities and include actions for green and blue growth in the agenda. The EU Farm to Fork strategy is the cornerstone of the European Green Deal. The EU legislative framework will be adapted at national level to ensure sustainability and transparency throughout the food system, policy coherence, and multi-level governance. Thank you.
Thank you, Amira. Mr. Bensic, please, if you want to continue or see if there are similar issues or insights from the Hungarian context. Thank you.
Well, as you know, we have a border to Ukraine, so we feel the conflict. In fact, it's very close to us. The conflict will definitely result in a situation which is exceptional, and it causes high pressure already now on the economy as well as on the agriculture sector. As you know, the ports in Ukraine are closed and most likely will remain closed for a while. So cereals, oilseeds are definitely declining, these stocks. In the event of non-deliveries, the role of domestic European supply and cereals will increase with very hard price increases in the cereal-based processing sectors. Now, these are things we face on a daily basis. And then there's also the availability of and price of fertilizers from Ukraine, Russia, Belarus, which are uncertain now. So the domestic supply of fertilizers is largely carried out through imports from these indicated countries. And then we have the availability and price of energy. And fertilizers seriously affect the production costs of domestic arable crop production, and through this the feed supply of the livestock sector. So we are looking at a situation similar to that of European countries. However, Hungary is an agricultural country, and we are capable of feeding about 20 million people. The population of Hungary is 10 million. So the conditions, as I said earlier, is good, in fact, but all these factors, what I just listed, are definitely going to be a huge challenge. Now, as a member of the European Union, we also have union-wide rules and requirements to comply with. So I can mention here, for example, the European Green Deal, and now it's a huge question mark. Can we actually meet the requirements of the Green Deal right now? It's getting harder and harder today. These initiatives provide a good basis for efforts towards sustainable food systems, but sustainable means we also need the preconditions, the conditions in general. And at the moment, the European Green Deal, with this surrounding environment and conflicts to the east of us, not going to be easy. In consequence, Hungary takes several measures and steps, concrete steps in order to transform our food system into a sustainable one. And I mentioned maybe one of those steps, just a few of them. We're currently working on Hungary's national biodiversity strategy for 2030, and our plan is to adopt it as soon as possible. The national climate law set out climate neutrality by 2050. Was adopted already. Now we have to work on the implementation itself. The expansion of areas under the ecological control will be further increased. What else should I say? Hungary is also committed to the green transition and aims to move to a circular economy. One of the central elements of the plan is to transform all relevant production processes from the very first step to the last, like waste management, in order to accumulate as little waste as possible. And we really need the transition right now, because the better we gear up for what is about to come, the better we're going to cope with it. We put a special emphasis on regional cooperation on this issue, and we organize and host a few ministerial meetings of the Visegrad 4+4 countries during the Hungarian presidency of the Visegrad Group, and started regional dialogue also related to sustainable food system in 2 rounds in October last year. And in March this year, I was in Serbia, in Belgrade, and had discussion there. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Bensic, for very clear and ably put words. And in the interest of time, I'm not going to summarize. I'm going to go to one of the questions because that has been put into the chat. And I think it's an issue that's relevant to many of our countries across the region, and it does relate to subsidies. And I'm going to see if you, Alisher Sukharov, would like to give any reflection on this. The question is, if the panel can share some perspectives on subsidies, which in our region, the person rights are still very skewed towards animal source protein. What advice can we give our governments, taking into consideration to support vulnerable farmers, rural households, or even, if I may add, also the environmental sustainability questions? I don't know, Alisher, any perspectives from your side on this one? Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. Indeed, subsidies is the important area, and speaking about from the experience from Uzbekistan case, this is now for us a new instrument. I would say new instrument in terms of approach, because government very long time in Uzbekistan subsidized two mainly key areas, which is the wheat and the cotton sector, subsidized heavily in Uzbekistan, and other sector were more or less not much paid attention. And now, last 3 years, subsidies in Uzbekistan, the diversity is changed dramatically. So we are focusing in different areas, particularly, first of all, for the water-saving technologies because of the water availability in the region, in the country. So subsidies now massively are provided to the new tools and instruments for water-saving technology. This is one area. This is really environmental practice. And also now, because of the latest challenges, particularly during the pandemic, as well as now with the global problem relevant with the war in Ukraine. So we have also now new subsidy schemes are allocated for the seed system, as well as for some areas, of course, in the livestock sector. So in the livestock sector now, we are, of course, subsidizing the imported cattle. This is one which is not much really sustainable, but now new subsidy system in the livestock sector is introduced for the local breeding programs. So these are the new areas now we are introducing in the subsidy system in Uzbekistan, but nothing is perfect. We are now this is now kind of for us new approach, a new program, and now we are working more in the subsidy system for digitalizing the subsidies program, because we understood that to access for subsidies not always easy, and not all, particularly for smallholders, not always really opportunities are there to access. That's why now we are promoting it through the specific subsidy digital system to provide more opportunities for the farmers and smallholders to access the subsidies in Uzbekistan. What is it? This is what I can share from our side.
Thank you, Alisher. I'm a bit conscious of the time. We are going to need to slowly wrap up this part of the agenda. I would like to give the opportunity to Ermira or to David to add anything further related to the subsidy question. Or there's also another question in the chat I saw related to in the short term, any programs that are being implemented in the field of food security or food assistance in your countries, if this is relevant. So I'd like to give Ermira and also to you, David, a final word, and we will probably pick up on some of these points again in the next session of the program.
So based on the situation, even for us, we have done a review of our national scheme support to farmers with focus to women and youth, and to the old farmers, generally speaking, in order to cover some issues or some problems that they are facing due to the current situation. So more money for fertilizers, more money for diesel in order to help them, to support them, to decrease the cost of production. These are the first steps that we implemented immediately in response to Ukraine crisis. This is.
Thank you. Thank you, Amira. Thank you very much. To you, David, please. Any responses to any of these specific questions, or over to you?
Okay, thank you. Well, I just wish to mention that we just had an election last Sunday, so I can tell you a little bit about what is about to happen and what's been going on. In terms of subsidies, again, this is the European Union, so we have certain rules, and we have to follow those rules. And I would say there's always a very intensive dialogue among the stakeholders, governments, everybody who's affected. And all subsidies, in accordance with the European Union, has been assured. And at the moment, we are looking ahead of a new 7 years multi-annual framework where we are going to subsidize and fund agriculture and also food industry. And that's going to be about 12 billion euros for Hungary. This is all, it's an 80% national share plus the European Union funding. So all in all, we are right now in the process of setting up the new government after the election of Sunday. So the new government is going to be the one who will then define these points in which direction. But there's no secret in that. So we all know which are the sectors that are affected, and we will definitely have a chance to offer them basically for everybody something. And that's the good news. We are really gearing up to be able to help everybody in need, and also to make sure that there is certain development happening so that we are more sustainable and more effective on less soil, basically. But this is an ongoing process right now.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you very much. And yeah, it's an opportune time, taking account, as you said earlier, balancing also commitments in the Green Deal and all the other aspects of sustainability with the changing context in the region as well. I am going to wrap up, let's say, this part of our panel discussion and thank our three conveners again for really sharing updates and insights into key issues that are on the table, and also key actions that are ongoing in your countries in terms of continuing to build on the dialogues and also the commitments made through the national pathways. So you're very welcome to stay with us. Hope you can, but in case you need to for the next part of the program, and thank you again to Amira Jetchi, Alisher Sukharov, and also to Mr. David Benchik. Thank you all very much. We will continue the discussion in other fora, I'm sure, in other work we have ongoing. Let us now move to our last section. We know from the stocktake report, and also, as Laura said at the beginning, you know, many of the issues that are revealed by the stocktake, also coming from the UN Food System Summit, are issues that are being worked on in the region, and there's already a lot, and globally, and there's already a lot of good practices and energy behind them. We've put a spotlight on a few that we think are particularly relevant to the region, and we're very pleased to have three speakers or three experts to cover these three areas. They've been patiently waiting, so we're going to have a look deeper into environmental impacts, continue that discussion of food systems, where we will hear from Maxim Vergicic, senior nature economist from UNDP. Maxim, you're very welcome. Food loss and waste then is another area. Food loss and waste is another area. We're very pleased to have Christina Mattsson, agricultural policy analyst from the Swedish Board of Agriculture in Sweden. Welcome, Christina. And then also we have Nino Tilosani, Member of Parliament, Chairperson of the Parliamentary Gender Equality Council from Georgia, Tbilisi. So, and Nino is going to give some perspectives on promoting women's empowerment in the food system. We will start with you, Maxime. We're looking forward to having some insights on the context of environmental issues as they link to food systems at stake in our region, what is being done, what can be done. And we know also that you're going to draw heavily on a UNDP report, reorienting agricultural production for a healthier planet, agriculture for food in Eastern Europe and Central Asia and its environmental impact. And it is in print. Over to you, Maxime. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Mary. I'm happy to be in this meeting today. Indeed, I'm going to be talking about the food production and how it relates to environment. And as Mary mentioned, last year UNDP looked at climate, biodiversity and water footprints of key crops and livestock products in our region. We mostly use FAO definitions, FAO data, most of which comes from national submissions and peer-reviewed methodologies for ranking the footprints. And I'm going to share some of the observations. So let me start with the greenhouse gas emissions. Well, food production accounts for 26% of global greenhouse gas emissions, and of these, 82% come from within the gate. So addressing emissions from agricultural food production at the farm level seems to be critical if we are to reduce our impact on climate. And we found out that in our region, wheat production contributes the most to climate change, almost at 15% of all emissions at the farm gate level, followed by beef, 14%, and cow milk, 13%. We calculated emission intensities, which is actually the emissions of greenhouse gases per kilogram of product, and we found out that beef is 50 times higher than most of the crops. Among the 17 countries, Ukraine and Turkey account for the largest total food agriculture-related greenhouse gas emissions, combining for more than half of all emissions. Then Uzbekistan and Kazakhstan also have significant shares, and these four countries together account for more than 80% of emissions from food agriculture in Eastern Europe and Central Asia. Now, I have to make a disclaimer that our region, our research looked at 17 countries in Central Asia, Caucasus, Western CIS, Balkans, and Turkey. So we didn't look at Russia and we didn't look at EU countries. Let me go back to the findings and now talk a little bit about biodiversity impact. So there can be different types of impact that the agricultural production can have on biodiversity. The key one, of course, is the habitat loss resulting from land conversion. But there are others, such as effects from agricultural chemicals, impacts on water quality that affects biodiversity, and effects on pollinators, birds, and small mammals. Pastures show a much more significant impact on biodiversity than any individual food crop. A total impact of almost 4 times the impact of food crops. Well, that was roughly to be expected because in our region, 73% of agricultural land is pastures. So again, we see the dominating impact of livestock here. Among crops, wheat has the largest impact, followed by barley and maize. Crops with the lowest per yield impact on biodiversity are fruit and vegetables. On a per country basis, a large majority of the total biodiversity impact can be found in just 3 countries. These are naturally the largest countries, which also have the greatest amount of agricultural production as measured by the area under cultivation or production volumes. And the countries are Ukraine, Kazakhstan, and Turkey. So summing up, livestock products and monocrop cereals seem to have significant impact on climate and nature, times greater than that of the crops. We should keep in mind that food is produced on land. So with growing population, fertile land is becoming a scarce resource. So as Mr. Benzik actually mentioned, we're using much more land to grow livestock than to grow food for our own direct consumption. And studies show that the pasture land and cropland for fodder make up nearly 80% of all agricultural land, and only 20% is used to grow food that is then directly consumed by us. So when we consider health issues, obesity, which is also one of the focuses of our discussion, is if you take aside alcohol, sweet beverages, and chocolate, then the main foods contributing to obesity end up to be refined grains, traditionally cultivated in our region as monocrops, as well as processed meat and red meat. Processed meat and red meat also had the list of carcinogenic foods, as everybody knows. So essentially what comes out is that livestock and monocrop cereals had the list of health issues and also had the list of environmental issues at the same time. We then checked to what extent governments in our region recognize and address these issues in their fiscal support to farmers. Well, we have to admit that systemized data on agricultural subsidies in our region is scarce. But from those cases that we studied, we found out that the vast majority of agricultural government subsidies in our region continues to incentivize production of monocrops and supports inputs such as unlimited water use of fossil fuels, mineral fertilizers, synthetic crop protection products, and as such. So vast share of government support continues to be directed to monocrop cultivation and livestock in some of the least efficient forms. Well, in economic theory, subsidies are an intentional market distortion instrument that is meant to secure certain social protection and societal well-being that is otherwise not delivered by the market, by the free market. So given the impacts I just mentioned, the impacts which extensive livestock and grain monocrop production in the current technological forms render on health and biodiversity and climate, it is hard to see how these current subsidies are actually fulfilling their role of delivering societal well-being. Well, we believe that government subsidies would truly serve their purpose of societal well-being if they supported production of foods that supply protein, calorie, and nutrients without causing health risks on the one hand, and rendering minimal harm, if possible, ideally no harm to climate and nature, meaning letting nature renaturalize at its pace, within its current carrying capacity. Selected cereals with higher protein content, such as buckwheat, or higher proportion of fruit and vegetables and nuts and land cultivation might be good starting points. It's certainly understood that transformation to sustainable diets is not going to happen overnight. There are important geopolitical, cultural, trade considerations that are to be accounted for in each country and across countries. And although it is desirable, it does not seem practical to expect that major reductions in meat consumption would happen in our region quickly. So we believe that that is going to be a transition period. And in that transition period, it's important to support countries with technological improvements in sectors, in particular in livestock and monocrop production, trying to minimize climate and nature footprints. So prioritizing non-ruminant animal production, for example, over ruminant animal production by working to shape public preferences is one of the ways. Regenerative farming, agroforestry, organic grain production, or reduction of plot sizes and land sparing. These are some of the socially, environmentally beneficial approaches that truly deserve, in our opinion, subsidy support. Perhaps the most critical issue is to ensure that livestock is produced through land management systems that respect the carrying capacity of ecosystems. The implementation of sustainable pasture management systems across Eastern Europe and Central Asia is paramount. Without fiscal support, green agriculture won't be competitive, at least for some time. So UNDP welcomes recent cooperation with several countries in our region, such as Kyrgyzstan, Kazakhstan, and Georgia, to work with our BioFin program, a dedicated program on biodiversity financing, within which we are dedicating an element of basically a line of work focusing exactly on greening agricultural subsidies. I was quite glad to hear Mr. Shukurov from Uzbekistan also mentioning their intention to work into subsidies. In our assessment, greening subsidies needs to lead to production that is free of chemicals and less fossil fuel dependent. So in fact, In the current geopolitical situation, which was one of the questions in the earlier discussion about the conflict, greening agriculture has the potential to reduce dependence on imported fossil fuels or reduce dependence on synthetic fertilizer and crop protection substances. So we are quite happy in this context about the path of development of organic agriculture that countries such as Kyrgyzstan are pursuing, which over the course of the past years helped them to progressively reduce their dependence on fertilizer imported from Russia. Let me just conclude by saying that UNDP will be happy. As I mentioned, we have a dedicated program. UNDP will be happy to work together with any government interested in greening agricultural subsidies. The sooner fiscal support to agriculture is reoriented to truly green production, the sooner people and ecosystems in our region are going to get fitter and happier, as Stephen Hawking once said. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Maxime, for you spoke very fast, but you had a lot of strong and clear messages at the same time. And thanks for bringing in again some perspectives on the issue of how we can improve use of subsidies to and financial instruments to for social reasons, but also for improved nutrition and for environmental protection. And I think you also summarized very ably a number of the key environmental challenges that we're also facing across the region. I would like to move on now, and maybe we will come back to you with a question. I am going to slightly change the order of the program, if that's okay, because I know that Ms. Nino Tilosani has a time impediment. So if it's okay with you, Christina, we move to the women's empowerment. Thank you very much. First, and then we'll come back on food loss and waste. Look, it comes out strongly that you know, people overall are at the center of our food systems and really need to be part of the discussion and part of shaping food systems of the future. And there's a strong emphasis on all people, but indeed on women and youth in our region. And so we're very pleased today to put the spotlight on women and to hear some of the perspectives from the Georgian context from you, Ms. Tilosani, in terms of, let's say, what has been going well or where you've seen progress and where women are leading change, but also in food systems, but also perhaps highlighting some of the challenges as well. Thank you. Thank you very much. You have the floor.
Thank you. First of all, thanks, Christina, that you let me go first, and sorry for my rush. And it's really a good opportunity for me to speak about promoting women's empowerment in the food system. And let's imagine quite a typical village in Georgia, high up in mountains or just far away from the center and from vital facilities. The village where women do not have access to transportations, mainly do not have access to higher education and healthcare. In such kind of remote places like these, girls are taught that from very young age that their future is not considered independently, that they are not part of, they are just part of households. These gender norms have a strong impact on women in agriculture, in rural areas. Meanwhile, women have a special role in the food system. And also Georgia has done tremendous changes through years, fighting against gender-based violence, sexual harassment, gender quotas in the electoral system, and many crucial changes has been done. Women's empowerment is a goal set by policymakers, all donor organizations, and civil actors. But still, we are there where we are. Women are paid less in almost all the sectors of agriculture. In agriculture, hunting, and forestry, women earn 35% of men's salary. There is both of vertical and horizontal gender-based segregation in employment, with men being more highly represented in higher managerial positions and in technical subjects. Also, women have less access to labor-saving technologies, partly because of the widespread stereotype that machinery is a men's thing, and because women have limited access to finance and decision-making. Women have also limited access to ownership of land and other property. This is background that exclude big part of women from economic and agriculture turnover. This is why special norms and so-called positive discrimination is needed. Women and men are not starting up at the same basis, and if not tailored programs and approaches, the inequality can never be changed. Here we come on the policymakers' role in the whole process. We set the policies and trends of development, and if not considering the barriers and factors women face, our actions will be gender blind. Speaking of neutral legislation and policies, it's far known that gender neutral legislation is deepening inequality, and only compensating the discrimination can have the positive effect. And yes, we also have programs, and I can highlight the particular actions we take to empower women in food systems. For instance, government is actively implementing various programs empowering women. Rural Development Agency is implementing new program specially designed for women. Greenhouse co-financing program, where program provides financial and technical assistance to potential female beneficiaries. This program is just and specially designed just for women. Also, state program for support of beekeeping agriculture cooperatives. Cooperatives will receive up to 80% co-financing if 50% of shareholders are women. Also, World Bank sponsored the project in Georgia to registrate agricultural land is really, the systemic registration is real help for women also. And the program within Enterprise Georgia have a 40% quota for women. Therefore, 40% of beneficiaries are women. Within this program, women can receive funds to finance small processing facilities in agriculture and agro-tourism projects. Also, state-run programs in agriculture are analyzed in gender perspective to tackle main changes. Yet the best indicator that we get from all the activities are real people. And I'm traveling in rural areas, in regions, meet with them, and it's most inspiring for all of us. These women in agriculture have very positive footprint, and they often are role models for other women. I believe this is the best incentive for women in general. And realizing this, I'm advocating women mentorship programs. I'm telling this to the ministry, to the government, so that we could use successful women to share their individual experiences. In this way, women empower each other, and this cooperation creates a better reality not based on a single individuals, but their shared efforts. At the end, I can lead non-stop speech on women's needs and existing barriers. But the thing is that gender mainstreaming is strengthening in many country policies. All the organizations supporting to the issue, and this summit, this forum itself, shows hopeful future. So these were very short remarks by my side, and thank you for this opportunity.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Ms. Tilosani. Because yes, I think we have to continue to be reminded of some of the, let's say, specific challenges that women face in countries and in sub-regions of countries that need to be dealt with specifically. And I also thank you for giving some hope and showing that what can be done, as you say, through showing where women are leaders, are role models, are taking action. So we have to get the right balance for the women community and for men working closely also with women and our young people in this whole really important space of our society. So thank you once again. Please stay with us as long as you can, but if you need to to disappear, we will wrap up fairly soon. We're going to thank you, Christina Mattsson, from the Agriculture Policy Analysis of the Swedish Board of Agriculture. Your topic kind of links very much also to the environmental, one aspect of it, to the environmental sustainability in terms of better resource management. Food loss and waste, and it's really good to hear from the Swedish perspective what are really the priorities on the table, and also some of the challenges, but a bit like Ms. Tilosani, where is some of the traction again, and where is some of the real energy and partnership work that you've explained to us in the past. Over to you, Christina. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, I'm going to talk about how to reduce food loss and waste. And my focus is going to be on dialogue and communication, because that's very much how we work in Sweden. And to achieve long-term and durable change in the form of reduced losses and waste in the food chain, this would require work in many forms and at many different levels. And countries can introduce legislation that force change. They can develop strategies, action plans, and also work with capacity building activities and increased awareness. But plans and strategies, they must lead to improvements in the practical daily work that's carried out in all the parts of the food chain. Therefore, it's important to develop strategies in close cooperation between the authorities and the actors from all the different parts of the food chain. Because then the work will benefit from knowledge that only the practical work and solving of problems can give. And an addition is that all those that are involved will own the improvement process together, and work will be also a learning process for all those that participate. We see that dialogue and communication is an important tool to achieve improvements in the daily work, not only in the strategies. And if each actor along the food chain works independently just to maximize economic output in his specific part of the chain, improvements that require a broader perspective will get lost. And we have some example. The lack of efficient harvest cooling of vegetables can cause losses much later in the distribution chain. We can see how low temperatures during transport of tropical fruit can cause chilling injuries that don't show up until the products are presented in room temperature in a shop. We can see that exterior defects are part of natural variation, but how can retailers and consumers' acceptance for non-perfect products increase? That requires a much broader perspective. And so in Sweden, the work to develop an action plan to reduce losses and waste finally actually led to a voluntary agreement on food loss and waste reduction. And actors along the food chain have now agreed to cooperate to reduce losses and waste and to collect data to better focus the work on where it's most needed. So we have a project, or had a project, that involved government authorities, the agricultural university, actors along the food chain. And here we developed detailed methods for measuring losses at the different stages of the chain. And the methods cover a number of both animal and vegetable products. And now in a follow-up project, we're using this methodology to measure how much is lost and wasted at the different stages. And with this knowledge, we can better focus, as I said, on problem areas. But we also give actors a tool to measure progress of changes. And finally, knowledge and awareness is increased. And as actors have contributed to developing the method, it's easier for them to start measuring in their own businesses. In another project we're working with, the aim is to increase the share of caught fish that goes to human consumption. And here we were working very closely with the owners of big fishing vessels. We're working with the processing industry, with coastal communities, and also the university. And the fish chain has, I have to say, they have so many factors and uncertainties that it is a very difficult sector to find good solutions in. And so the practical knowledge of the industry is even more valuable here. And finally, we also need to cooperate tightly also at the international level, because the food chains today are global. And the way of handling products in one part of the world can influence the waste when the products arrive at the receiving side far, far away. A late cancellation from the buyer can cause severe losses for the sender on the other side of the world. For this reason, the UNFSS has developed a code of good practice for handling fruit and vegetables with the aim of reducing losses and waste. And when we did this work, countries from around the world, from North and South America, from Africa, from Asia, Europe, contributed with input from their respective industries. And the result is on the UNFSS webpage. So as we see it, dialogue and cooperation is central in getting a more sustainable and circular economy in the food chain and reducing food waste. And the value of using knowledge from the chain and the people who are doing this in the daily work, it would be hard to get in any other way. Yep.
Thank you. No, thank you, Christina. You closed up there on one of the key points that I was taking from your discussion in terms of the interconnectivity and the whole chain needing to work in unison from the beginning right to the end consumer, or at least there needs to be a co-sharing and changing in mindsets also in terms of the acceptance, as you were saying, of different types of ugly vegetables, or also that some changes in the early part of the chain can contribute or can prevent food loss or food waste later in the chain. So you really highlighted the interconnectivity and also the need for the private sector and academia and government policy to also really work together. And I know that some of this discussion you told us is also very much focused around kind of the business case, if you want to say that sometimes, you know, where does it make economic and environmental sense also to prevent food losses and food waste along the chain. So thank you once again also for sharing the experiences from Sweden, where, you know, with quite a developed systems, food loss and food waste is also still very much, I understand it, on the agenda and needs continued action. Yes, yeah, indeed. Good. We are 3 minutes, I think, over our time schedule. So I think we will wrap up fairly quickly. I'm going to, Maxime, did you want to come in on something related to water issues just before we go to the closing? If Raymond can just give us, I know in your report with UNDP, you also had some insights into the whole issue around water conservation and water use, which is a very important topic across the region as well. In a minute, if you wanted to.
Yeah, thanks, Mary. That's indeed. I mean, I mentioned we focus on biodiversity, climate, and water footprints, and I didn't say anything about water. I could just quickly say that, you know, as a group, Eastern Europe and Central Asia, in our research and our analysis, ended up like 25% higher than the world average with respect to total water footprint per unit of livestock. Again, that's a bit of a like food for thought. And beef again stands out. You know, the water footprint of beef is more than 8 times greater than that of cow milk, 9 times larger than the poultry meat, and 3 times higher than of eggs, for example. And just to say that, you know, largest water footprint when you outside livestock taking crops. The largest footprint comes from nuts, pulses, and oil crops, and the smallest comes from sugar crops and root vegetables. So if that information is interesting, this can be used as food for thought for whatever repurposing support, or thinking about action planning for better environmental standards in agriculture. Thank you.
No, thank you, Maxime. And I think it is definitely interesting. I think our region and our countries have taken a huge step forward in terms of in the last year, and due also very much to UN Food System Summit and the COP26 in terms of really bringing together the environment and agri-food system sectors at country level to go deeper into these common issues and how to minimize impacts and ensure environmental sustainability, in addition to economic and social, as we continue work on our food systems. We will draw to a conclusion. I want to hand back to Raymond Yele. And Raymond has many hats, as we said at the beginning, but one of them is as co-chair of the issue-based coalition on sustainable food systems, who has been responsible for organizing and convening this side event. So Raymond, if you'd like to share with us a few insights or take-home messages from your following of today's very rich session. Thank you.
Mary, thank you very much for this, and I would like to particularly also thank the panelists and also the audience for the question. I think a very rich and excellent discussion, and I think it shows again that these dialogues are really needed, and they must also continue, because we are bringing the different aspects to the table. We are looking at this also from the different, let's say, interest perspectives. We touched on, let's say, the different stakeholders, and we are not going to be able to address, I think, the three dimensions of the sustainability of the food system if we are not going to continue on this dialogue. Because I think we touched on the topics of agriculture, we touched on the topics of trade, gender equality, and leaving no one behind, environment. So we are, let's say, Mary, you just mentioned in your concluding part, we are on, let's say, we made progress in the region, of course, but I think if we're looking also in the different dimensions, we still have much more to do. Maxime was outlining the issues in terms of also environment, the impact. So there is still a lot which we need to address, with Nino coming in also on the gender, the social dimension. There is much more in this case to address. And I think as the food systems at the moment are under enormous stress with the situation we have in the region, we also have to make sure that not suddenly the dimensions are coming under stress. Because if we are having subsidy programs at the country level, maybe in the first instance, the economic aspects are going to be put at the forefront, and they might be eventually, let's say, overshadowing that we still need to work on the environment, and we need to work also on the social dimension. And this is something, while the discussion in our views and in my views would be really quite important. So I think from the issues-based coalition's point of view, we are ready to further facilitate these dialogues. We are going to have, and this is more an FAO event, the European Regional Conference, where we're talking certainly also about food systems in May. And we're talking about also healthy diets in this case, but we are also continuing as the IBC on the food systems to have further webinars to outline these issues. We have the requests from Serbia, we have the requests also from Tajikistan. So stay with us. We need your inputs, we need the inputs of the audience and the actors in the region. So Mary, thank you very much. Back to you.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Raymond, for trying to capture what was a very extensive and many aspects of the discussion. I am going to draw our side event to a close, but let me just, I really do want to thank Raymond thanked all our panelists and all our contributors to the discussion. We also want to thank Chatham House as one of those contributors who helped us closely in setting up this session, as well as all our partners in the issue-based coalition on sustainable food systems. We've noted the request for our various reports that we've referred to today, and we will circulate those broadly and widely when they are finalized in the next 1 to 2 months maximum. They're imminent. Let me also thank, we will also look at how to share the presentations and various things that were asked for today by our audience as well. We will make things available to you. And as Raymond said, we really value also the active participation of the audience and the specific questions and inputs that we receive from you. I also, finally, I do want to thank again the UNECE for giving us this slot during the Regional Forum for Sustainable Development. And I want to thank all my close colleagues who've really worked to prepare and make sure we had a very smooth implementation of this side event. And if you don't mind, I am going to name them. I'm going to name Valeria, Aniko, Valentina, and Jana. And I hope I haven't forgotten anyone, but very much thanks to all our team as well here in our office for the support in all the logistics and arrangements and the technical management of the side event as well. So I think we will, okay, there are other side events, yes. In fact, it's quite a rich week during the Regional Forum for Sustainable Development. And I think Aniko has just shared something there with us, but there are a number of other side events and ongoing main panel discussions as well during this week. So thank you once again for tuning in to our side event, and we look forward to continuing working with you and continuing our work at country level and across the region. So on behalf of the Issue-Based Coalition Sustainable Food System and Chatham House as our co-organizer, thank you very much and have a good rest of the day. Thank you. Bye-bye.